Hello and welcome to my channel. I'm Jason White and this is Jason's Weird Reads, and today I am going to be doing a from the hip recent reads. I've been doing a lot of these lately, and I think the reason for that, well, I'm going to talk about that in a minute. I just want to explain briefly what from the hip is basically, and it's also, you know, the recent reads, which basically I combine together. So what you get is, first I just shoot the shit with you a little bit, and then I go into what I've been reading recently. It's basically a recent reads, or what I read in December type thing. So first off, I wanna apologize for my sketchy video creating late. I've been wanting to do 2 videos a week on Monday and Fridays, and I haven't been keeping up to that exactly as I wanted. And the reason for that is it's basically because of Christmas and the time of year. It's just the weekends are when I shoot the videos, and it's been kind of crazy. I've also been kind of crazy with work lately. I've been working kind of strange hours. Not as strange as they were when I was at the factory. Don't get me wrong, I'm happy. I'm happy working where I'm working, but sometimes the hours are a little split up and crazy, and I get like a lack of sleep or something. Yeah, so Christmas has really put usually it does. I mean, I don't think too many people are thinking about horror books at this time of year anyway, but I could be wrong. So we've been preparing a lot for Christmas, a lot of, you know, Christmas shopping and doing things like, you know, family oriented things, and so that's been a lot of fun. You know, it's one thing I was afraid I would miss out on, but I haven't, and I'm very happy to be spending as much time with my family as I possibly can, because, you know, the kid, my son, he's going to grow up one day, and he's 10 now. A lot of people say this is like bordering on that timeline where he's not going to want to hang out with me anymore. And that could be true. I don't know. I guess we'll see. But, you know, until that happens, I want to hang out with him and play video games and watch movies with him as much as possible until that day comes where he's like, yeah, you know what, I'd rather hang out with my friends. All right, so while I was going through these books, I realized that I did a from the hip video not all that long ago. It's like 4 or 5 videos ago, and it was 3 weeks ago according to the YouTube. You know how you see videos, when you see a video listed, it'll tell you how long ago it was posted, and so it's 3 weeks ago. And so while I was compiling this list, there's like quite a few books here that I've read recently, and I'm like, wow, I'm like reading so many more books than I used to when I was at the factory. I used to do one of these lists, or one of these from the hips, every probably 2 or 3 months at the very most, and I would have the same amount. So I'm like, I'm reading a lot more. So I'm really interested in seeing how 2024 is going to be. Right now I'm at 73 books read this year, 72. I'm not too sure if I'm going to be able to complete any more books, but I'm going and there's a reason for that, because it's Christmas. Like, I'm shooting this on Christmas Eve's Eve. It's Saturday, Christmas is on Monday. Tomorrow's Christmas Eve, so tonight I'm hoping to maybe crack open a beer and read some horror-themed Christmas short stories. And there's one book in particular that I downloaded that you can get too. I'm gonna tell you what it is right now. I just need to pull up my Kindle here. The book I'm talking about is literally Dead: Tales of Holiday Hauntings, and this is edited by Gabby Triana. And there is so many good authors in here. You have Ramsey Campbell, V. Castro, Lisa Morton, John Palisano, Clay McLeod Chapman, Jonathan Jans, Haley Piper, and I'm sure there's more than that. Let me see here. Chet Williamson, Stephanie W. Whiteovich. There's a whole bunch of people in here. Did I say Jonathan Jans? I believe I did. There's a lot of authors in here. I would like to see what they do with a Christmas story, a horror, holiday-related Tales of Holiday Hauntings Christmas stories. And so I'm hoping to read some tonight and maybe some tomorrow, but I won't be finishing this book. I'll probably finish it next year. So that's going to be a lot of fun. So definitely check that out if you can before the holidays. If not, you know, you can pick it up on Kindle Unlimited and keep it for the year until next year. Unless, of course, you don't mind reading books like that during the middle of the year. I kind of like saving them for Christmas. I sort of like keeping my Christmas feelings at Christmas. That's just me, though. I know plenty of people who like singing Christmas carols in May and June and July, and I just find that irritating, but that's me. All right, so we're going to move on to the book club choices for January. I would say choice, but I've been, like I said, I've been kind of busy, and I've been forgetting to do things, honestly, and this is one of them. So I got to do the poll very late. So if you go down, the link is in the show notes. Go there for the book club and vote for the book that you want to read. There's 4 books listed there. So just go and check out what the books are and vote for one of them. I'm going to make a short too, reminding everyone to go vote, because January is coming up. We may have to do it a little bit later so everyone can get the book. I'm not sure. So the voting only stays live for 3 days. I wish that we had control over that. I also wish it would tell me how many people voted on it, but it's on the Fable app. If you don't want to click the link down there in the show notes, just go to the Fable app and search for Jason's Weird Reads and Jason's Weird Reads book club, and it'll show up. So what am I currently reading? Well, lately I've been reading the Mr. Mercedes trilogy by Stephen King. I read Mr. Mercedes. Actually, I think it's the Hodges series, but I call it the Mr. Mercedes series because I don't know, Mr. Mercedes. It's the first book, but yeah, and also Mr. Mercedes, the character, he kind of remains a character throughout the all 3 books. Not to spoil anything, but I read Mr. Mercedes like way back in 2015. I remember seeing the book at Walmart. They had like a display of all these paperback books, and Mr. Mercedes was one of them. They were all on sale for pretty cheap, and so I grabbed Mr. Mercedes and I read it right away, and I enjoyed it a lot, but I never continued with the series. Now, why do I do that? Because I'm absolutely horrible with series. And so I've been wanting to tackle the whole thing again, and so I decided to do so on audiobook. And so I reread Mr. Mercedes, and then I read Finders Keepers, and right now I'm on End of Watch, which is, all of them are fantastic. I absolutely love this series. I might talk about it a little bit more in what I've been reading about those 2 books. I don't really want to talk too much about End of Watch because I've already spoiled a little bit with the character of Brady, but who is Mr. Mercedes, and I don't really want to spoil too much more. So I don't know. We'll see. And I'm also reading, as I mentioned, that Christmas book, Literally Dead: Tales of Holiday Hauntings. And like I said, I don't expect to finish it. I just want to read 2 or 3, maybe 4 short stories from it, and then continue on maybe next year, maybe even finishing it next year. So I'm basically just starting that, and like I said, I don't plan on finishing it. So I may or may not talk about the stories I read in future episodes of From the Hip recent reads, but we shall see. All right, now what have I been reading since my last update was the Cryptid Readathon wrap up, along with a couple other books. And so since then, I've read, and sticking with the book club, we read Black Mouth by Ronald Malfi. It's been a while since I read anything by Ronald Malfi. I think it was in 2010, maybe 2009, somewhere in that area. And I don't even remember what it was I read. I remember it didn't really leave a big impression on me for whatever reason. But holy cow, did Black Mouth ever, this book is dark, man. Now, I've heard that some people complain about the main character, Jamie. And I could see why. I mean, this book is dreary. This book drips with atmosphere and dread. I mean, if you like a dark book with very little comedy in it, then you're probably going to enjoy Black Mouth. And a lot of people compare this book to Stephen King's It. And although I do see how you could compare it to that, it's really it's a bit of a coming-of-age story. I mean, you're going back and forth between childhood and adulthood, and there is definitely an ode, I wouldn't say to the book, but to Stephen King himself. I don't know if Ronald Malfi writes in Stephen King's style, but he definitely has a Stephen King style with his writing. But he's, I'm not to take away from Stephen King. I love Stephen King's writing, but Ronald Malfi, even though he sounds a little bit like Stephen King, his writing is all his own, and it's a little bit more beautiful than Stephen King's sort of straightforward writing. He definitely has his own style, Ronald Malfi. And I absolutely enjoyed Black Mouth. It's about a guy named Jamie, who's he's a chronic alcoholic, and he makes a mistake at his job. He's not drunk at the time, but he's probably seriously hungover, and he gets sent to rehab. And instead of doing 30 days, they decide to keep him for 60 days because that's just how bad off he is. The first sentence of Black Mouth starts off with here, let me read it to you. Totally butchering this review, but this book is kind of complicated, but I absolutely loved it. But I'm going to read you the first line because it's like, talk about bangers of a first line. If this doesn't pull you in and want to read more, then you should probably just avoid the whole thing. 1 week after our mother committed suicide, my brother Dennis was taken into police custody while walking along the shoulder of a winding mountain highway, wearing nothing but a pair of saggy white briefs and what I can only assume to be an empty expression on his face. So his mother commits suicide, and his brother is found in that state that I just mentioned, walking on the side of the road in only his underwear, and he's totally unresponsive. It's about a week after his mother died too, so he's brought back to his home, his hometown of Black Mouth, and this is where I'm going to leave it, because one reason why I'm kind of tripping over myself here is I went into this book completely blind, and I think that's the best way to go in. I mean, the only thing I knew about the book was what I read in the synopsis, and it doesn't really explain exactly what's going on in this book. So there's so many things that go on in this book. So he goes back, to gather his brothers in like a mental hospital, and he has to go back home, and this is where all the secrets come out. And you can trust me, the secrets keep coming out, even like near the end of the chapter or near the end of the book. There's like one last secret that comes out, and it's just like, my God, this book is so dark. So I can kind of understand why this book might not be for everyone, because it's very dark and it's kind of bleak, and also the words fade off for some reason. I kept putting it in my backpack. I brought it to work here and there, and that's not a good idea because the gold foil lettering or whatever it is, it really does wear off. So I recommend just carrying it if you can. All right, so that excellent book, totally recommended if you like dark atmospheric reads. Also, I read Mr. Mercedes and Finders Keepers, and I already talked about that, but I'll talk about what Mr. Mercedes is about, the first book. It's about, like on a cold morning, there's a job fair. The job fair is guaranteed to hire like 1,000 people, and the times are very hard. A lot of people have lost their jobs, and people, they need a job. They need money, and so there's a bunch of people who stayed overnight, stay in the line. And Brady, our goon, our bad guy, he decides to steal a rich lady's Mercedes-Benz, and he plows into this crowd of people waiting. And Detective Hodges, I should say retired detective because he's retired, he gets himself involved when Brady, the bad guy, and you learn who it is pretty soon. This isn't like a whodunit. It's more of a like how type thing. Brady sends him a letter through the mail, pretty much goading him to commit suicide. And so it goes from there. Hodges, he's kind of suicidal because he's an ex-cop. He's old, and there's like nothing for him to do but sit around and watch TV. And he's not like wanting to commit suicide because he's sad or depressed, or he is depressed, but he's not necessarily sad, if that makes any sense. He's bored as hell. And so once Mr. Mercedes sends him this letter, it like starts firing up his brain, and he goes into detective mode. And the interesting thing about this book is he sort of compiles a team, his own team. Some of these characters, especially Holly, continue on in many other books. I don't know what happens to Jerome. Right now I'm in the third book, and there's kind of something sad going on, and anyone who's read the entire series knows exactly what I'm talking about. So the second book, Finders Keepers, has a different kind of case, even though there is a correlation between that case and the Mr. Mercedes case. And it's a really interesting, reading the reviews for it, a lot of people didn't like this book, and I can kind of see why, even though I liked it better than the first. It's because you don't really hang out with Hodges at all until maybe about quarter of the way through. For the first quarter of the book, which is, I don't know how long in pages it is, but it's a good long time in the audiobook. You're following what's going to be their next case, and it involves a young man who finds a dead writer's let me back up a little bit. The very first chapter of Finders Keepers, you're in this writer's home, and it's broken into by 3 people wearing ski masks, and they kill him for his the money that he's keeping in his home, and because he stopped writing. He stopped publishing, I should say. He stopped publishing his work, and he's a very famous writer. He sort of reminded me of like a J.D. Salinger type character. He didn't have too many books out, but what he did have were like American classics, and he decided to stop writing, stop publishing, but he kept writing, and everything he wrote he put into a safe in his house. And the leader of the people who break into the writer's house, is like obsessed with him. He's like one of those dangerous type stalker fans, because he didn't like what happened to one of the main characters in these books. He kills the poor writer and he steals all the writer's money, and of course all his writing, which ends up being in like, I think it's like 167 moleskin notebooks. That's a lot of writing. And so once he gets back into town, he hides those books. He buries them in a trunk in his backyard near a river, and he gets blackout drunk and commits a crime and ends up going to jail for like 30 years. So about 30 years after he's been sent to jail, our main character, Pete, I believe his name is, I might be wrong on that, he finds this treasure. And he gives the money to his family without them knowing about it. He just mails it to them. No notes or anything. Because they're hurting. And the reason why they're hurting financially is because his father was waiting in that lineup from the first book, Mr. Mercedes. That Mr. Mercedes ran him over and totally destroyed his legs. And he can't work now. So the family is like this close to, being on the streets. So finding this treasure is a bit of it's a blessing in disguise, but it's also a bit of a curse, because somebody's just about to get out of jail. Now, I think I spoiled this series enough. I absolutely adore this series. It's really good. It's a lot better than I thought it was going to be, and I can't wait to read finish the third book, End of Watch, which is the end of the series, but the continuation, I believe we continue with Holly. Not too sure about the Outsider. I think she does make an appearance in that book, but also in the book Holly itself. I want to kind of finish off that whole series if I can. So that was a lot of fun. I absolutely adore these books by Stephen King. So next up, I read Reluctant Immortals by Gwendolyn Keist. Now, I'm not going to have as much to say about these books, or this book, as I did the Stephen King's Mr. Mercedes. And the reason for that is because I really enjoyed it, but it's shorter. It's much shorter. I mean, the Mr. Mercedes trilogy is a trilogy after all. This book, Reluctant Immortals by Gwendolyn Keist, there's a lot going on in this book, and I really enjoyed it, but it's funny how deep the conversation goes into women's rights and that type of topic. And yet it remains kind of lighthearted in a way. It's hard for me to explain, but what we're basically doing, I mean, there's characters like Dracula is in this book. The Dracula, Renfield, is in this book as well, and everyone pretty much who is in Dracula, who survived Dracula, is in this book. The main character actually is Susie from Dracula. the book. So it's kind of like a continuation of that, and we start off with I think it's Susie. Let me double check here because I don't want to be wrong. I should really start taking notes on these books so that I can just flip to my notes anytime I need to know a character's name. Okay, I think it's Lucy. My mistake. So it's Lucy. She has defeated Dracula, and she keeps his ashes in like all these different urns that she has spread out to the city of Los Angeles. And something is happening to make him come back alive, and she is desperate to keep him dead because when he's alive, all he does is he abuses her, like quite harshly too. So she's kept it as her job to keep Dracula at bay, but she is now at this point in her life failing horribly, and Mr. Renfield has a role in this. Now, I really enjoyed this book. It was a lot of fun, but it does have a lot to say that I was really impressed about. I think I don't think I know because I listened to it. There is an episode of Talking Scared. I'm going to try to remember to link it down there in the show notes so you can go check it out, where they go really deep. The main host talks to Gwendolyn Keist, and they go into this book. It's Neil McRoberts, I believe his name is. They go into this book quite deeply into all the sort of social commentary that I think was very important in this book, because I'm having trouble talking today. And I'm running out of time, because my God, this is like moving along, isn't it? Although a lot of this is from me just yakking on about blah blah blahs, you know. All right, so next up I read, I should have added this after Mr. Mercedes and Finders Keepers because it's Stephen King, but I'm going to add it now anyway. It's Christine. I read Christine by Stephen King. This is a book that I had not read, and I don't know why. It's just one of those books that escaped me. And now that I've read it, I'm glad I did, but I did have some issues with it. It's kind of weird. It's kind of a weird book. Blackmouth, for example, I just talked about that. One thing I didn't talk about was the how it switches between first person and third person. And it almost fits. I don't know if there's an actual point to it. If there was, I kind of missed it. It could have probably been all told in third person, but it wasn't. It was told in both first person and third person. Christine does this as well. And this one almost makes no sense for it, because for the first third of the book, maybe less than that, maybe a quarter, I don't know, you're following the guy who becomes obsessed with Christine, his best friend. You're following from his point of view in first person, and then once something happens, you go straight to third person for a good half of the book or more, and then at the end you go back to the main character, the first person perspective again from the guy who gets obsessed with Christine's best friend. And that was a very strange jump, in my opinion. And another thing I didn't like about Christine was, there's a lot of people who say that this book is very fat-phobic, and it kind of is in the sense, because anytime somebody is fat, it's almost as though Stephen King is using their fatness as a descriptor, as that's one big reason why they're evil. And I didn't really appreciate that, but this book was written in like 1980 or something like that, so it was a completely different time, which doesn't necessarily excuse it, but I mean, he still does this today in a sense, but it's much more watered down. And there are some other like maybe problematic things about this book, but overall I really enjoyed Christine, despite I could get over the somewhat problematic things. I mean, I've read much worse, much worse. But it seemed like this sort of thing influenced a lot of writers, because you don't see it as often these days, but for a while there, especially in the aughts, maybe the early 2000 or the 90s, the early 2010s, the teens or whatever, you see a lot of writers doing this, and I was always against that as a person who struggles with his weight. It's not always easy seeing the bad guy being portrayed as a fat person and their overweight problem being a part of why they're so evil. But anyways, I'm going to stop talking about that because Christine is otherwise a good book. It shifts that the perspective, first person to third person perspective, and I don't think that's necessarily a good thing for this book. It's almost as though Stephen King realized partway through the book that he needs to shift perspectives in order to get the entire story, and so he just used it as a sort of a way to cheat. So this isn't, like, of Stephen King's early books, this isn't his best, but it was still pretty good. The first third, while we're in the first person perspective, actually reminded me a lot of John Irving, and I was really digging it at that point. The main character, I think it's important to the guy who's in the first person perspective. He's not exactly the nicest guy in the world, and that's an interesting thing to discuss, especially when criticizing Stephen King for his perhaps problematic issues. You first want to blame the author, but when you get through the book a little bit, you realize that it's not necessarily the author, it's this character. He's very much a gray type of character. He's not necessarily a good guy or a bad guy. I mean, he's a good guy in the story, as far as the story is concerned, but he's still a bit of an asshole, if that makes any sense. Alright, moving on, because I totally butchered that as well, to be somewhat nice to myself. Anyway. I also read The Reformatory by Tananarive Due. Now, this book, I think, needs to be a classic. I reviewed this book separately because I thought it was such a good book. I really, really wanted to just yammer on about it for a little while, and I did so for about 10 or 12 minutes. You can check that out wherever it goes. I think it's on this side, but for some reason I'm thinking this side. Just check out the card that comes up here. I'll post the review for it there, so I can maybe cut this video a little bit shorter and not talk about it again. And so there's 2 more books here that I read in the month of December, and that is some Christmas books. Now, I read It Sees You When You're Sleeping by Gemma Amor. This is more of a short story to maybe a novelette. I would say it's longer than a short story. It's definitely a novelette to maybe even a very small novella. This book was a lot of fun. It was about a man who gets back together with his cheating girlfriend on Christmas Eve. And just as he's opening up presents with his adopted niece, his poor niece's parents both died, so he basically adopted her. They're opening up presents when they hear this awful screaming coming from down the road. And so he goes to investigate, and what he finds is a giant monster has, like, completely slaughtered somebody who lives in the house from where the screaming was coming from. This book surprised me because I didn't know that Gemma Amor could get quite that gory. I mean, this book is pretty gory, and it's a really fun Christmas horror story. So if you're looking for that sort of thing right now, as you might be, definitely give this a try. If not this year, then definitely next year. I love Gemma Amor, and this was maybe not my favorite from her, but it is still a very good read. I really enjoyed it. So that was It Sees You When You're Sleeping, and that's by Gemma Amor. And one final book, and I'm done. The Visitor by Sergio Gomez. This book is about a trucker and a young guy with his dog. They're in separate vehicles, obviously. They both are traveling through this wicked-ass snowstorm on Christmas Eve. One is just trying to get home to his family, and the young man with his dog is trying to get to, I think he's trying to get home too, to his parents' house. And so they get stuck in the snowstorm, and there's a diner nearby, and so they both end up there. I believe actually the guy in the truck was in a bit of a bang-up, a crash in his truck. He hit something in the middle of the road and then ended up swerving off. So, like I said, it's storming really bad. The snow is just collecting. And because the snowstorm is so bad and because it's Christmas Eve, the roads aren't being taken care of, and so there's nowhere for them to go. Luckily, there is that diner up the road, and there's a bunch of people who are kind of stuck in there anyway. They all live locally. They could probably go home if they wanted to. I can't remember if they're all stuck there too or not. But they end up going in there, and for the first bit of the book, you get to learn who these characters are as they talk and get familiar with each other. And then the power goes out. Once the power goes out, things start to change because there's a visitor, and this visitor isn't human. This visitor also is hunting them now because it knows they are there. Now, this book kind of reminded me a little bit of The Predator. Now, and there's a good reason why I think of The Predator. Now, it's pretty much on the cover there, so I'm not spoiling anything. This visitor is an alien. And I think the alien looks more like the gray type of alien that we're all familiar with. But it has some Predator type equipment with it. Especially its gun. It has like the 3 little lights that shine on you before it zaps you with its bullets or whatever it is, plasma. And so it also has like a dog creature, and I think in Predators it was where the space people land on this planet full of predators. I think they had dogs in that, or no, it was like one of the Alien versus Predators, I think. Anyways, there's a movie out there, a Predators movie that has predator dogs type creatures. So it has one of those as well. So I'm going to leave it at that because I don't want to spoil the whole thing. But let me tell you that this book is gory and it's fun, and I really enjoyed it. I believe I gave it 4 stars. And that is it for what I've been reading recently. I hope I didn't keep you too long, but if I did, and you're still here, just leave me some Christmas trees deep down there in the darkness, and I'll leave you some Christmas trees in return. Thank you for watching. I hope that everyone watching this has a very good holiday season, even if you don't celebrate Christmas. And if you don't celebrate Christmas, I hope you have a great week, and you'll probably end up getting the day off, or at least a few days off, so I hope you enjoy those as well. Thank you for watching. Keep being creative and keep being safe, and I'll catch you guys in the next bookish video.